we could settle down. We waited sufficiently, I think, for people who might have been delayed by the rain and the traffic. So perhaps we could commence. I'm delighted to inform you that this is the 5th InfraKatha, which is a collaboration between the Infra Vision Foundation and India Habitat Center. It is an opportunity for us to demystify infrastructure and start conversations around it, making it accessible and interesting to people. It is also an opportunity for us to listen to experts in the area and refresh our own ideas and imagination. And given that the topic this month is heritage tourism infrastructure, I cannot possibly think of a better person to speak about it than my very dear friend Aman Nath, whom I have known at least for almost 40 years now. Almost 40 years, 38 years at least. So I must tell you that when I first met Aman, he came to us in the Directorate of Film Festivals. I was a deputy director, and he came to, as a graphic designer, he was going to design a poster for us for the International Film Festival, one of the sections of the festival. Yeah, I used several, but the first one I'm talking about. And it was a most beautiful poster that I had seen till that time. It was a silk screen print with silver and gold. Yeah, with Sangai of Manipur. So, and I remember I was so struck by it, and we became friends also. And incidentally, at that time, he had just bought Neemrana Fort, along with O.P. Jain and Lekha Poddar, right? Yeah. So that was the start of another adventure for him. But he was telling me that, oh, we've just got this thing and I'm busy restoring it and I'm going to do this. I said, seems like a madman. I mean, oh, you're taking an old khandar and he's going to restore it. How much money is going to suck up and how is he going to do it? Many years later, of course, I went and saw it and I was completely awestruck by what had been done to that place. So, heritage tourism infrastructure, he is the expert in India. He has a master's degree in history and a heightened sense of time and its ravages and what can be done to reverse or modify or improve upon them. Look, this is what I'm quoting. He was asked for his biodata. He said, personally, he feels that long biodatas begin to sound like obituaries. So I'm not going to go very much longer, but I'm just going to say a few things about Aman which I feel need to be mentioned, that he has written 16, at least, iconic large format books on places such as Jaipur, Jodhpur, Pushkar, etc. And his definitive book on the Rashtrapati Bhavan, Dome over India, is presented to all heads of state by Indian presidents. So it's a very well-traveled book indeed, amongst the highest circles in the world, much higher than any of us can aspire to. He's also written the centennial histories of the Tatars and the sesquicentennial tomb for Shapurji Palonji. He was creative director of the book on Sipla, but I won't carry on because there's so many achievements to Aman's name, and then he will accuse me of, treating it like an obituary, so I'm not going to do that. He's very much here. He will talk for himself. And in conversation with Aman is another wonderful person, DN Mukerjea, senior media executive, whom I've heard earlier also, doing these wonderful chats with people I know. I remember one with Upamanyu, I think you did some time ago, yeah, for one of his book launches. So, better known as Bonnie, he began his career as a business journalist with Business World magazine. He later launched the Indian edition of Fortune as its founding editor. Subsequently, he built the digital business for media conglomerate ABP Group as president ABP Digital. Most recently, he was chief executive digital business, the $4 billion RP Sanjeev Goenka Group. So, to such expert personalities on the dais, I have to only do one thing, and that is swiftly leave the dais to them. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Sunit. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me give you my introduction of Aman, and which is a little more contemporary. Aman is the way I would see it, given my filters of having been in business media and having built digital businesses. Aman is a classic startup person, right? He saw an opportunity which nobody saw, and went and scaled there. But when I told Aman that I'm going to introduce you as a startup person, he says, no, I'm an upstart, right? So that was a very Humphrey Appleby kind of line, right? And so Aman actually built a phenomenal business around the Neemrana Hotels. And the reason that's really, really exciting is I need to put some context so that you understand the enormity of what Aman has done, and it will sort of frame this evening's conversation, right? If you were to think of India's soft power, and we love talking about our soft power, I think there's films, right? Bollywood primarily, but also other movies, Natu Natu, famously, right? There's a lot of cricket now that we take IPL all over the world. And we talk about our civilization, right, which goes back thousands and thousands of years. Yoga, which is very famous these days, is a subset of that civilization, right? Interestingly, today's talk also coincides with a much talked about book, William Dalrymple's recent book called The Golden Road, where he talks about the civilizational impact of India in much of the world over like 1800 years, right? So that naturally begs the question, what have we done with it? And before Aman talks about it, I want to throw some numbers. As per the latest UNESCO report, we have 43 World Heritage Sites. Italy at 60 has the most, and we are number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the pecking order, right? The Archaeological Survey of India manages 24 of these World Heritage Sites. And if you go to the Archaeological Survey website, they talk about 3,800 sites that it manages outside of the 24 UNESCO sites. Of these, 175 are in Delhi alone. So these are really large numbers that we're talking about, right? Unfortunately, data is very difficult to come by. And while I was researching, I was trying to, because I was going to chat with Aman, I was trying to figure out how many forts and palaces are there. There's a travel website called the Travel Triangle, which says that there are about 1,000 forts and old forts and palaces in India. There's another gentleman whom I discovered in the process of my research, no more there, a gentleman called Pramod Maruti Mandes, who's an author who has a book on Amazon, in case anybody's interested, which talks about 4,000 forts and palaces in India, right? So essentially, there is a lot of this which is available, right? But then when you start looking at the data isn't very flattering. Let's look at it in terms of investment. Of the 43 UNESCO sites that the ASI manages, between fiscal 17-18 and the first half of 22-23, the ASI spent a princely sum of 250 crores. A princely sum of 250 crores over a 4.5-year period, managing 24 sites. You can do the math and understand on average how much it would have spent, right? I don't know whether this was capital expenditure or operating expenditure, but it gives you a sense of the kind of money that it spends. Between 1920 and the first half of 22-23, the revenues from all these sites was a princely 385 crores. Now, of course, there was COVID there. So if you look at the year in which the highest revenues were, that was in 1920, that was pre-COVID, and that was 240 crores, right? So the 24 ASI sites got us revenues of 240 crores. Now let's assume that this data is not correct. And there are many other monuments that generate revenue as well, beyond the ASI managed ones. Let's multiply that figure 10 times. Let's multiply that figure 30 times. We're still at $1 billion, which is really not even a rounding off error for a $4 trillion economy. So what have we done with this is really I wasn't actually aware of this, that the numbers, when you start looking at it through a numerical framework, that our track record has been so poor. And I must thank Vinayak and Rumjumdi for giving me the opportunity to have this conversation and research this, right? But in this context, when you understand, right, where the government also hasn't been successful, here is a man who's really not just built and scaled a business, but also has restored and continues to restore by building infrastructure, and not just hard infrastructure, soft infrastructure as well, and we'll touch upon it later, right? And which is why it makes him very special and makes him a very special guest. The reason I rattled off numbers is so that all of us in this room can put a context to Neemrana's journey. In the absence of those numbers, you don't get the context, right? Aman bought Neemrana famously in 1986, right? He launched it in 1991. A little story, Bicky Oberoy's boys were also chasing Neemrana, but they went to that place and they later called up Bicky Oberoi and said, "Sir, wahan pe mat jayega, paisa mat daliyega." After Neemrana was built, Bicky Oberoi came and saw the property and said, "Aman, my boys were idiots." I don't know what Aman said after that. Maybe he'll tell you that, right? I compared him to a startup person. I think where he diverges with modern startup guys is he's never taken VC money and he's built a profitable business, right? So I want to start by understanding your moment of epiphany for seeing this, because some of us know you well enough to know your story. So it's not just buying the properties, it's also battling the bureaucracy and building the infrastructure and ultimately getting people over there and then scaling it to the 18 or 20 hotels that you have. Over to you.
So it is Ganesh Chaturthi, so it's a good day to start with Siddhi Vinayak Chatterjee, and who has actually not succeeded in telling his Rumjhum wife to stop the Rimjhim. And he just told me that many of his friends have gone back because they fear traffic jams and so on. I'm delighted to be here, and it's lovely that Sunit did the introduction, because he knows many more secrets which he hasn't talked about. Yeah. And we go back also a certain length from the Fortune magazine days. Yes, he did a story. He said the reluctant hoteliers, actually. So because they were looking only at the facts. So I wanted to begin this. It's kind of abstract subject because I attended the Patanaik lecture, which was mythology in infrastructure. So when you create a subject, you have to make some connections. So as far as I know, and I learned this not so long ago, that there are two senses that each of us can have. No, there are two senses, and each of us can have only one of them and not both. So one is the time sense, and the other is the sense of space. And it's very curious that each of us has one which is predominant. And although Sunit said, because I have a time sense, I've done my master's in history, but I have a zero time sense. Okay, so I have a space sense, as it happens. And if I walk into a labyrinth, I can kind of draw it. I see the most complicated buildings, and I don't need to do a virtual walk, and I don't need to see them from the sky. But when it comes to time, if somebody asks me how long have I known Vinayak or Vidyun, who we grew up in our childhood, but I have a notion of time, which I also learned in history, but I don't have a precise sense of time. So what I do know is that what history taught me was that time is the only asset worth talking about, because if you have great plans, go to bed and don't wake up the next morning, there go all the plans. So time is your first asset, which carries you through life, through your plans, your dreams, your fortunes, whatever. And time wasted is time lost forever. So when people are saying, I have lots of school friends who retired and saying, बैठेंगे, beer पिएंगे, धूप खाएंगे, all this, I said, अगले जन्म करेंगे, because we have so little time anyway that we might as well get on with doing what we want to do. So back to time and space. So when I look at feedback ventures or infrastructure, Let's, I mean, I don't have a board, but you can picture a kind of Raza painting if you want, a square, which we could call space, and time is maybe an arrow, a circle. So infrastructure is on space, and the arrow actually takes you forward, but when a road brings you to a Neemrana hotel, it also takes you backwards. So it's actually a two-sided arrow. It's not static. It can go this way, it can go that way. And the difference with Neemrana is that Neemrana is time first, because we are waking up dead ruins, buildings abandoned, and we're doing that in space. So we are taking you backwards, but because you get married then and you make progeny and so on, so we're also taking you forward. So I think the only kind of visual link and the philosophical or physical link I could think between infrastructure and heritage is that both are arrows which are have arrowheads on both sides. It's a snake with two tails or two heads or whatever it is. Yeah. So now I can answer your question.
What prompted you to start Neemrana? And it was just a mass of ruins, right?
So all this is, I suppose, obviously retro thinking, and people ask this question so many times that just out of sheer boredom of saying the same thing, and I have to invent a new answer every time. So maybe it's a mixture of all those things. So one of the things I think of is, I think not having money is the greatest asset. Because then you actually think out of the hat. You think, you do, and when you are born with a golden spoon studded with solitaires, eventually somebody even holds it out and feeds you. So you cut your hands, you cut your mind, you cut your entrepreneurship, and we have eminent Marwadis with us, So if you study the Marwadi history, you realize that there was this Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, which happens in all families, that there is one person who creates an enormous amount of wealth. So let's call him Brahma for the while. His children then have the onus of dealing with that. If I give you $100 trillion today, you're an unhappy man, because you might think you can do whatever you want, but doing whatever you want without any effort is the root of all unhappiness. So I think that spirit of enterprise, which I may not have had, if my family had stayed in Lahore. My great-grandfather was the first Indian Sessions judge in what was the capital of the Punjab, or which was called the Paris of the Orient. And he was also a nationalist and the president of the new Arya Samaj, which Swami Dayanand Saraswati had formed, and found him very dynamic, so he made him. And he wrote 5 of the progressive niyams of the Arya Samaj, which is education for women, the eating of meat, of akhadas, of people learning to, fight and not just, offer one cheek and get another, because there were all kinds of threats in the offing. So it's a combination of many things. So when you are born of refugee parents who never talked about the past, that is one very important distinction between, I'd say, Rajputs and Punjabis, or even Marwadis of the old world, that they didn't say, I had this, I used to have 100 horses, I used to have a gold throne. They're dealing with today. So we were born post-independence, just when our parents had moved out of the tents. And my father and his brother, who were all Indian champions of badminton, were very active people. They used to go out and kill wild boar in what is now the Pragati Maidan and the Supreme Court, and cut it in pieces and distribute it to people. There were 6 million people. I mean, it's unthinkable. What did they drink? What did they eat? How did they defecate? How did they sleep? Who provided for them? And all those families then rose out of their nothingness, their new nothingness, and eventually bought over all the big families of Delhi, who were just sitting on their land. They had industry, they had houses, in prominent places. So decadence is one thing which was completely out of my life. So it's fortunate that that I was born at the time I was born. And later, when I did the book on Shekhawati, I spent 10 years photographing the Havelis of the Marwaris, admiring the old lot, who was so thrifty that if they made 1 paisa on 100 rupees, they were truckloads, they were shiploads of things coming from Britain, and they became the go-betweens to do the trading. But the British record that first they were absolutely honest, and then they were not greedy in the sense of today. So on huge fortunes, they made a little, and that little became so big that if you go to Shekhawati and see the Havelis, which were built in 1830, 1850, and so on, because they had left, and they had left their women in the first lot, and then the women came too, that they must be nouveau riche of that moment, but they had good taste because they built amazing Havelis. They wanted to make a point where they went back. And not just in saying, I have a grand Haveli, but they did Panch Punyas, they did a Pyao, they made a school, they made a Dharamsala, they made temples, Gaushala, all that, because that was the social responsibility, the CSR, which was not dictated by anybody except their own conscience. So all of us actually, not I, have learned from my experiences of keeping all my senses alive and alert, greatly from my parents, because I know my father only as a workaholic, and I'm blamed for that. But I think karma is the greatest joy, especially if you choose, if you find what you want to do. 18 hours is not enough in a day to do what you really must do. So because I value time, because I value this, and because I didn't have a past, because it was just sliced off, everything was left there, perhaps there was a desire to have some place to go to. People say, "Main gaon ja raha hu." Where do I go? I can go from Delhi to Delhi. And even my greater family, one of my grandmothers was from Kapurthala. They had a wonderful house, and I went there once. But you can't go to your grandmother's father's house and feel good about anything because you have no sense of ownership or no sense of contribution. So I think it's entrepreneurship to wake up dead buildings and not inhabit them, because I cannot live in, we've done some 32 projects in 30 years, which is insane, but you have to work fast, and we did so many things, and the offers kept coming. So it's a combination of so many things in education, the lack of means, and therefore an overdose of activity.
Do you want to take the audience through those pictures that you
yes,
shared with me?
Yes,
just so that they
do.
understand how difficult it is to make this journey in terms of what it was and what it became?
Actually, I was wanting to talk about something else because I didn't want it to be I, me, and my kind of lecture. But then both Bonnie and I said that you must talk about this. So there it is. Okay. So I think you can just run it. As people read it, I'll say whatever little needs to be said because they're before and after pictures.
But you may want to talk about some of those stories, including the bhoot ones. The ghost ones.
Yes. No. I'll tell the stories. I'll tell the stories. Yes. No. So this actually, Neemrana began before it did because of my huge Haveli fetish and the Marwadis, that I was eventually able to find a small Haveli, which is 50 kilometers from Delhi near Sona. This belonged to a Subedar, and if you can see up here. Do we have a pointer? If we had a pointer, anyway, you can see the two red coats. So there was this Subedar who locked up. In 1857, he locked up the British, the British were all fleeing here and there, so there was a collector of, not Sona, there was a place not far from Sona, who was running, and all the Maharajas were giving them protection. So they were running to Jaipur and to places where there were British armies. So he caught hold of some women and children of one of the collectors and locked them up in this Haveli, which is why there's a memory of those. And then the Redcoats came and rescued them, and that man was hanged. Is it here? Ah, yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, so that you can see. So it was a very small Haveli. I was able to buy it for 30,000, and when my friends came to see it, they said, "You're completely insane. I mean, what are you going to do in this?" It was full of 1 million bats, which is the story of all ruins. And then you can go forward, you can see its transformation. So then what happened was that very soon this Haveli became the talk of the town. And everybody who came said, "We want to go to the Haveli." So Terence Conran went, and the American ambassador went, and all the great painters, Raza, Hussain, Tayyab, they all went. So there were like two kinds of people. Have you been to the Haveli or have you not been to the Haveli kind of thing, was happening. And this, then I did a second one across from this one. One is 17th century, and this one is 18th century. And I never go there because I don't have rest time. I don't yearn for rest time. So this one I then sold to my best friend's son, who's like a nephew to me, and I re-restored it for him in the last 3-4 years. Now you can just run through the pictures fast. There's no picture of that Haveli when it's ready? Oh, sorry. No, sorry. Okay, if you've seen it, it's all right. No, I was sorry, I was looking. So this is yeah. No, I'd wanted it with 2-screen thing because then you'll save time and you can see the before and after. But since my ears are not my eyes, I can't see them anyway. Yeah. Okay, so you've seen that, and we can go to Neemrana. So then this Neemrana opportunity happened, and I was writing the book on Shekhawati, coming back, saw it with light, and it was just sitting there on the hill, and went to meet the Maharaja and talked to him. He said, "मैं 40 साल से बेचने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ," because he had moved out, it had started to fall upon itself. And this year, Neemrana has become 560 years old. So it's a madness. And this part, which you see here, is the oldest part. This is back to 1464. And then they kept extending it, and these walls were made in the 18th century. And so, quite frankly, I'm neither an architect nor a hotelier, but I think when you are not good at something and you have a complex, that is the second advantage. So I think this is not a good management class. That money is not an asset, and education, the lack of something, like Avi said, we are number 2, so we try harder. So I suppose you do. So when you look at this, people say, why on earth would you have bought this? So I remember going with Martan Singh and Mani Man and Romi Chopra, and they all said, "You're completely mad." But this is where people have tea now, and this is where the most amazing people have lived and had. So you can go further for you to, you'll have to do it that way. So these are actually of similar areas. So what did happen was that this was all built for warfare. So there was no space in that sense. You just had to shoot at people, and there were cannons on the ramparts. So eventually it had to get out of itself, because there's a fortress here to watch out for enemies. So broke the first wall and made a pool out of it. Sorry. You can go ahead. Yeah, so these are before and after pictures, how ruined it was. I mean, nobody would imagine that. And so this is the oldest part, and there happen to be 9 rooms in this area. So they are the Navratan rooms. This is Lesunia Mahal, and and Moti Mahal and Hira Mahal. And the idea was not to jazz it up and make it a jacuzzi kind of place, you know. It's done very simply. It's done with tuna, and they're 9 feet, you know, because the width of that they could span the ceiling was that. And this broken rampart, which nobody could, I think this one you have to go further on. Yeah, this is the same place. That this whole thing had collapsed. So it looks easy, but if you have to raise it 40 feet like this, then make the terrace, then complete this arch which fell off. So this is that, and so on. So I think we'll have to go faster now. Yeah. So then, you know, as the Haveli happened, and once a banker from New Zealand came, and he said to me, I have calculated that Neemrana is 4,500 times bigger than the Haveli. So I'm not a figures person, you know, and I think figures very often scare you. And I think another rule which I follow is never consult a consultant. You know, because they haven't done any of the things you're asking them. And you're asking them to tell you how to do it. So I remember Arun Puri telling me when he wanted to do Aaj Tak that he got, I shouldn't take the name of the company because I'll get sued, no? Yeah. So he got a big report on it, and they said what Vicky Oberoy's people had said to him, don't touch it with the barge pole. He said, it's too early to start this. So Arun said, okay, then let's do it. So why did he have to ask them and then do it? I didn't ask them and I did it, because you have to know that if you're standing on the rampart of a ruin and seeing the most splendid sunset, that tomorrow when it's ready, it's going to be the same and much better. So if you are then able to offer, you know, strawberries with homemade ice cream, they're going to taste that much better than they could. So this one is a 700-year-old fort, which is called Kesroli, which was an absolute ruin because 700 years is an age. And we can go ahead. There must be some more pictures. Yeah. There was absolutely nothing. And the Thakur Sahib was a wing commander who had spent all his money. He'd put grills here, you know, the kind you shut like that. And he said that he'd put grills because dogs got into the fort. I said, but the dogs get in from the entrance. Maybe you should tackle the entrance and not put grills inside the fort. Anyway, because he trusted us and so on, it went on. This is Patiala, which was a ruin. This is a public-private partnership with the government of Punjab. So what happened is that when people started seeing the transformation, first they couldn't believe it. Then they also realized they couldn't do it. So then people started saying to us, please do it. So, and we've continued to do it. So if you see, you know, this became the Punjab archives. So they blocked all these walls, ruined this whole thing, and when you knock them down and restore it, look how beautiful it is. So they've just finished filming Freedom at Midnight here, which is going to be released on the 7th of February. This is a very interesting story. These rooms are about 30 feet cubes, you know, 30 feet high and 30 feet. So there was a Japanese tourist who was here once when I happened to be there, and he was looking rather lost, and he was small, and he was a bit terrified, and and the beds are very high because naturally we've done, we bought old beds and things. Yeah, and look at the condition it was. There was just white ants everywhere. So it is a lot of work, but the rewards are amazing. Do we have more pictures of this? I try to make it very short. So show the next ones. Oh, they aren't anymore. So this man is standing there, and he was trying to say to me, how do I get on the bed? So I said, you have to run and jump, you know. But they don't have the same sense of humor as us, actually. Yeah, so eventually now we've got, we've even got 3 steps to some of the beds because they're really high. And people have said, one day a guest said that, what if I fell off the bed? So I said to him, but how many times have you fallen off a bed? So he said, never. So I said, then why would it happen here, you know? So you can carry your own phobias, and I think eventually you have to make of whatever you've got, a story, something that makes it wonderful. You said I should tell a few stories, that I've got a few. Now, this building is where the tsunami happened. So we had just finished restoring it, and our first set of guests was coming the next day, and we woke up at 6 in the morning, and because we were leaving to catch a flight in Chennai. And on the way, everybody was running and screaming and shouting. It looked like some sort of revolution had happened. I was going over a bridge, and I realized that the river was going in the wrong direction, because the sea was here, and the river was flowing this way. And then people stopped us and jumped in the car, and they said the tsunami had happened. So the sea went back 7 kilometers from this wall, 7 kilometers, came back and hit this. And I was very sorry to have left that morning, because we had restored the first floor, which is completely ready, and that's where I'd slept. So if I had not got that flight, I might have been terrified for 3 minutes, but I would have seen the sea go back. And it went through this building, and there was 2 air conditioners lying on the ground floor. They lifted them, broke the doors, and they were found 1 kilometer away. I mean, it's so insane to think this. And when we began restoring this, we should talk of politicians occasionally. Yes, people, they came and stopped us and said, how dare you build something on the sea, because there are all these laws. But we said, except that it's 400 years old. We haven't built it. So they said we had to go with a suitcase to meet a certain lady, chief minister, etc., which we didn't go with. The work was stopped, and so, but then eventually we went on. And so this is called the bungalow on the beach. It has a temple, which was also knocked in, partly in the tsunami. And on the other side, it has a fort, which is the Dansberg Fort, which was built by the Danish, because they bought this land from the Raja of Tanjore to trade in pepper. And why would shiploads of pepper go? I mean, I don't know if anybody asked themselves this question, because nobody eats pepper in Europe like that, which I learned very late. Because they used to preserve their animals. When winter came, there was nothing to eat. So they would kill the animals and wrap them up in pepper and stock them through the winter. Like we talk of salt as a preservative, so pepper was a great preservative. So then we've gone on. I think now you can just run through them much faster, so you will get an idea of, you've got an understanding of how nothing can become something, and then it goes on and on. And because the 2 processes are happening simultaneously, just 5 days ago, somebody said, a big Seth in Shekhawati, their 2 brothers, they're fighting, they've broken the house, they're selling the railing, somebody's selling the beds. So, they can travel abroad and go somewhere, but you can also find use for them in your own country. This is Gwalior. This is a wonderful building, which is an underground where the Ranis used to rest in summer. This was as a Maratha place. And Tijara is the latest Grand Madness, which is, we don't have a before picture of this? Oh, okay. No, you have to see what it was, because this was never completed. What happened was that this is the Mardana Mahal, the Rani Mahal, the Hawa Mahal, and then the Raja dies. So everything is left there, no plans, there's nothing. And Bhairav Singh Shekhawati is complaining he has no money to pay. He was chief minister, to pay his people. So I said, give it to us. So this is a non-architect's work. As you can see, this is my drawing. So I actually make a photograph from whichever highest point. There were no drones at that point. And then, I said, I shall make an alignment. I shall make Kanch Mahal in the middle. And this was 3 years it took to make these 7 hanging gardens, which can't really be seen now because there's so many trees, but when you're there, you can see them. Go ahead.
I had a...
Yeah.
Are there some more pictures that you want to show?
Let's finish the pictures, because then we are everywhere, okay? Are there many left? Just run through them, please. Yeah, so you will get an idea that nothing was here. Even this has been built, but then I'm explaining them how the rest of it has to be. Go ahead. Yeah, that's the Rani Mahal. And then we had to make a pool. So this wall ran into this and there was a slope here. So we dug all this down here, made a conference hall, a pool, and there's a waterfall which falls over these rocks, which is quite kind of high, you know. Yeah, that's the pool. It's 100 feet long, and it's quite splendid. There's a lot of water here. It's not Rajasthan. So this is those terraces coming up, and in the next pictures you will see, I think that all of them are ready. So this ala here is, oh sorry, where is it gone? Okay, it's there actually, maybe it's cut out, yeah. So it's all become so terribly livable that nobody can believe. So this is the rock I was talking about, which was dug because there was earth going down like this. So all the facilities have been sunken in a way so that you don't see them, because you don't want to see modern buildings in a heritage building. And since there are no norms, and since there was no heritage conservation and all this at the time when we started 40 years ago, the joke is that the joke it is, because they keep calling me to architecture colleges, and I say, the choice is to go there and sort of infect all the students so they start doing this too. But they introduce me as an architect. So I keep saying I'm a non-hotelier, non-architect, a non-everything. But when they look at the work, it has got a UNESCO award, was nominated for the Aga Khan Award. It got the Legendre honor and so on. But those are only, so this was put to tender by the governments, it was successive governments, Congress and BJP and so on. And 14 people took the papers, which included all the big chains. There were also people from Dubai, and then they just didn't do it. So having built so much, I've now decided that I should also do something contemporary. So this is near that Haveli, which I began showing you with, is this. I had an idea that we should live underground because, you know, it's so warm here, everybody. So this is where Anjana and Shrikant's land is next to this, just behind this, because this thing will never get ready because I did this with 3 other friends who are not equally enthusiastic. So one will have to buy them. So this is all brand new and built now. And articles have started to appear in the Gurgaon Times, 400-year-old Pauri found, and all this stuff. I'm now 400 years old. Which is all right, yes. Okay, so is that the end? Now just race it through. So when you look at it from the sky, and if you have time, when there's an atom bomb, if you're inside this, you'll all be saved. Yes. It's got 32 underground rooms. It's quite a madness. Yeah. Okay, that's it. Now we can do the question.
You know, one of the things that I wanted you to touch upon is, why do we as a nation have such a poor relationship with our heritage, right? I mean, it's all around us. We just looked at the numbers, the kind of numbers that the Archaeological Survey invests, right? I can take you through a whole set of numbers on, you know, visitors and so on and so forth, and which are very poor.
The answer is very simple, actually, and all of us are Indians here, I think, mainly, will understand this. India is the only continuously alive civilization in the whole world. The only, you know, Mesopotamia, Egypt, Rome, etc. Everybody's come and gone. China had stayed, but they did the Cultural Revolution. So if you are, so there's a kind of, no, I wouldn't say a silent arrogance, but there's an overconfidence that so what, you know, we can build it. So we don't value the past because we are not a museum culture. So dead civilizations say how civilized we are. You know, I've got a 19th century lota in my museum. If you go to Haryana, you will see an old lady walking in the morning with that same lota to, you know. So it's an everyday object and it's of no value. So we you know, we can exchange it and take a plastic one instead, which we are doing now, you know. So I think that we don't have any value for that because we say, you know, of course, everybody has it, we can do it, we can make it, that's one thing. And the second is that there is no merit in restoring somebody's thing. That's a very Western concept. So in Aurangzeb court, in Aurangzeb's court, there was a Dutch traveler who came. He said the entrance to every city in India is strewn with ruins and pillars and things. Nobody restores something that his father or grandfather had built, because there is more merit in building something new and putting your name to it. But how foolish of them to not realize that their building will fall to the same fate. So now that we have Western liberal educations, now that we go to museum, now that we know how a spotlit lota looks better than just lying in a village in Haryana, so we are also following in that way, and parts of our civilization are also dying.
But are we doing enough? I mean, the one thing that strikes me as far as Indian heritage is concerned is that we really, really lack imagination in terms of how to market it. I mean, it's just, I mean, you know, ASI builds, I don't think we've gone beyond sound and light shows, which is still tom-tommed as the, you know, forefront of technology, number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, they talk about, they talk about creating bathrooms and, you know, they jump up and down. And I'll tell you very personally, I mean, you know, I remember ages ago, really ages ago, first time I was visiting the Tower of London, and, you know, there was one of those guys with that halberd and whatever,
Yes.
and he was talking about 1066, and, you know, pardon me saying this to all if they're Americans over here, but, you know, there are a bunch of Yanks with me say, wow, 1066, that's really far back, right? And I said, you know, I mean, do you even know what we had achieved by 1066, right? But that imagination there is no imagination over here, right? And I'm going to ask you something pretty controversial now, and I'm going to, we discussed this, right? Yes, we had over lunch.
Okay.
Is the problem that the government actually holds the reins of Indian heritage through the ASI, and the ASI is stuck in the old mode, like family silver, and you know, unless you fix ASI, you will not be able to do much about, you know, heritage tourism infrastructure or whatever it is, and they will keep.
It's a good question, but the answer is that, you know.
So should ASI be privatized? Should Aman Nath run ASI?
God, I'll be shot dead in 3 minutes. You know. Yeah. There's too many vested interests. You know. No, I think ASI is not what needs to be privatized. I think that our conditioning has to change. What has happened is that we were colonized, and when the Brits went, but our psyche still remained colonized, you know. So, and we are all victims of that, you know. So when I was much younger, and we met Sir John Thompson from the British High Commission, you know, because he'd been knighted and sent here, because it's not the commission, it was the High Commission. So all this, you know, conditioning was something else. So today when we meet, I shouldn't have taken the name of any country, but today when we meet any of the representatives of the country, you know, when we were kids, they were there, and this has happened, you know. So now, you know, people like us who are doing our own thing, we meet them as equals, really. And sometimes when they're foolish, we say, Bevakoof log hai, you know, because we also think that we are better than them in so many things. So that is one aspect of it. But I think the tragedy of it is that when we were children, and I'm looking at Anjana, for example, that, you know, we had a certain desire to be westernized because we were deprived that. I got the first pair of Levi's jeans in St. Stephen's College. It's hard to believe, you know. And everybody looked at my thighs all the time because, you know, it was such an achievement because somebody's father had brought in Levi's jeans. Then we became tailors to the whole world. So now everybody's wearing our clothes. We've got over that complex. We've got over so many other complexes. But there's, I think, a recolonization of the mind which is happening at the moment, you know, which is very odd. I mean, now since we are talking hotels, I'd like to talk that. Why would we want to go to a hotel in India, forget heritage hotel, and eat Danish pastry and croissant and all those things which we make much worse than the original numbers, you know? And why is, I mean, what is the national food of India? Is it chow mein, or is it pasta, pizza? You get everything. But, can you think of a reverse situation? Can you think that you go to a Japanese hotel and they say, chola kulcha khayenge? I mean, it's unthinkable. Nobody's doing it. You know, you get chow mein in the smallest places. You get momo. I mean, all that Asian food and so on is because we are, I don't know if it's a complex. At one level, we want to experience everything. And at the other level, we think that our food is not good enough, you know. So some people have broken the mold. There's that wonderful restaurant called Swati, you know, in Bombay. Then you could go and say my grandmother's khichdi, which was like, oof, it's cow dung or whatever. Now people are eating it on leaf and saying how delicious it is, actually more wholesome, it's better than jaw and you know all that. So I think that there are many people in their communities who are showing us the way that we should be doing the Indian thing with dignity, wearing Indian clothes. I went for the foundation of a temple in a godforsaken village in Bihar, and there happened to be a wedding. That man was wearing an electric blue suit. He was sweating away, poor chap. He was wearing a tie. You know, he was all wrong. He couldn't sit down, he couldn't stand. And here we are saying, you know, we are wearing kurta pajamas and, you know, dhoti and all that. So I think that there's a cycle. We went through it. We became westernized. I had a Scandinavian house when I was in college, which had yellow cubes and green cubes and mobiles, but I very quickly got out of it. So I think that problem will take maybe 1 or 2 more generations, and I hope that you know, everybody won't be wearing mini skirts, you know, which is what happens, and events take place. You know, ladies who never seen their own legs are showing it to the whole world, you know, and feeling so embarrassed about it because they've been told to come in red mini skirts, you know, and their thighs are not the right size and so on. But they have to be like that. Why can't they just wear a proper sari and look fantastic, you know? But these are the issues that, you know.
But so you're hopeful, are you? Or that there will be somebody who will build this infrastructure going forward? We'll I mean, not I don't know whether Vinayak wants to build.
No, if Vinayak had built the infrastructure of Delhi, all the guests would have arrived, you know. The water would have gone in the drains. So, you know, somebody has to get it right. Today I got a forward saying that potholes are the best thing in the country. Did you get that? I got a fantastic WhatsApp, and it said that how fantastic are potholes, because first you break the road, then you make it out of bad materials, then the car breaks down, then the automobile industry flourishes, then your backbone goes against, then the hospitals flourish. So there was a whole thing, the whole economy is based on fantastic potholes, you know. So you should maybe do a talk on
the Gadda economy. It's called the Gadda economy.
Should call it that, the tailbone economy.
Yeah, that's right, the tailbone economy. Yeah. No, but the point is that, you know, you've built a successful business out of this, right? You've added many hotels. If I were to look at, you know, all over India, there are individuals who are trying to renovate and recreate some property, and, you know, I mean, where many of us, at least Vinayak and I and Rumjumdi come from Calcutta, right? There are a lot of those old zamindari houses
lot of consciousness
that are being restored and stuff like that, right? So is this the early signs, early stirrings of something now that, you know, we are a more confident nation, and you will see many more Aman Naths emerge in the next
so. That's why
50,
I go to
100.
the colleges to lecture, you know. The thing is that 40 years is a long time, actually. You know, I've been at it for exactly 40 years, because 84 is when I bought the Haveli. The day Mrs. Gandhi was assassinated, it was like October 84. So a lot has changed in the thinking. But I'm saying the two things are happening simultaneously. You see, the village people, they don't, I mean, but even we've created a huge market for Indians. So we get people from, you know, small towns who've heard of Neemrana. Neemrana is like a list you must do. It's like tick, 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 you know. So people land up, and, you know, then they say, yeah, you know, they have to climb steps, and the people who are rich are very often not healthy, and then they want to eat, and so it's all wrong at the moment, you know. So you get great days when you have fantastic people, then you also have people who are making their beginning, but that's very good, because India is on the right track, and it will happen. So I wanted, you said that I didn't have to be too serious. I thought of just a few examples of the change of how people have come here, how different countries people come here, just things that stay in your mind, So once, let me start with which country now? Yes, so once we had, many years ago, a group of British nobility who all had fabulous gardens, ticketed gardens, which were part of the National Trust. So they wrote to say that they wanted to meet the gardener who had laid the Maharaja's gardens, which is me. But it was Wednesday, so I made the excuse that I, can't be there because I'm not on duty every day to run to Neemrana, so I thought I'd got out of it. But I'd gone to Baroda for some work with Rekha Puri. We were doing an art show. And as I got into the plane coming back, somebody said, "Aren't you Aman Nath?" Because that whole group of English people were on that flight.
And they thought you were the gardener?
No, they had been told, that, I said, I've laid the garden, so I don't know. I don't know the Latin names, I don't know anything, but I can generally see that if you go to a nursery, you see there are 20 kinds of greens. So we don't make a garden for one chrysanthemum show in the year. We make it because you can come any day of the year. So all kinds of greens. So you have said 20 kinds of greens in Indian plants and so on, so people enjoy that. So they had all kinds of questions to ask, but they'd already been there. They were now going to Udaipur, or there was some story. And so they said, "Can you come to the back?" They were sitting, all of them, there were 20 of them, sitting at the back of the plane. So I stood in the aisle and talked to them, and they asked me questions. And I learned that because they were so much into gardens, they said, "Oh, it's the first time we see pollarded trees in India." So I have no idea what are pollarded trees. In Shekhavati, when the khejuri tree grows, they pluck off the twigs and feed the camels. So what happens is that it becomes a bit like leper's fingers. It reaches a point and becomes a noddly because they keep breaking it from there. So there was a Mr. Pollard who invented that you should cut them and then they become like, they thought it was decorative. And so they called them pollarded trees. So now we can tell people you can see pollarded trees from the Neemrana ramparts, So everybody gets their own thing out of it.
It's like bacon and aubergine.
Yes, absolutely. So once we had, quite early in, I should actually acknowledge the presence of Sonvi Kekar, who's here. She's our CEO. And lots of the credit that you're giving me actually belongs to her because she's been in the company quite long, and
Sorry, but since we're in the topic is heritage tourism infrastructure, every time you buy a property, are you able to influence the GE of the region?
No, we don't.
GE being Gadda economy of the region? Does the infrastructure grow? Does the state come in and build better roads so that, and so on and so forth?
You've touched a very touchy thing. As far as I know, they don't exist. You see, the psychology is, here comes a rich man. In the beginning, I was called Rajneesh's agent because he was being kicked out of America, so he was looking for a place, and I went with a friend who looked like Rajneesh. So they all thought I was a Rajneesh man. So there were articles in the paper on the 1st of January, Neemrana Mahal mein Rajneesh ka haath. So everybody started took me 5 years, maybe more, to say I was not Rajneesh, I was not his friend, that we were independent, So what was the question? Sorry.
No, I'm saying, every time you buy a property,
we don't buy properties
or whatever,
lease
a property, whatever it is.
Yeah, so
does the physical hard infrastructure in the region improve because the state sees it as an opportunity to create something, employment, more income, so on and so forth?
People look at it as an opportunity to fleece you, actually. So there's no help coming from anybody. But for example, if you put a signboard on the highway saying, "Turn right to Neemrana Fort Palace," the government comes and removes it. So then people curse you and say, but there was no Google those days, so people would overshoot and come back and ask people in the middle of the night, because the PWD would take it away in storage. You have to pay them money and get it back. So there is no help, So we say you can't put signage. They will not make connecting roads. They will take all the taxes from you. So the question, answer to your question is no, no, no for everything really.
So you have to build your business,
Everything you have to do.
everything from scratch over it and over and over again, because
So
there
if
is.
eventually you become perverse and start enjoying it, you know. So you have to buy land and drill it and, you know, pump water up, and you have to make fun, of it. But there is a little change in the sense that, you know, governments are not saying, "God, if these people can do it," they used to say, "We can also do it." They used to say that in the beginning. Now they come there and say, "No, we can't do it." Okay? So when they'll tender it, and if you win the tender, then they go back to becoming government again, you know. It's called PPP, no? Yes, okay. So
Public-private participation.
public-private partnership.
Mm.
So the actual definition of that in India is private party's problem. Because everything you have to do, you have to build the road, you have to drill the water, you have to, you know, get the cables, do the, you know. So if I ask the audience, how long could we have run Neemrana on generators? Many of you have been it. I mean, it's just a wild guess, it'll answer your question.
First
Yeah.
10 years?
22 years.
My God.
I mean, it's insane, you know. So if your daughter's getting married and you get a generator to your house, you say, "God, may it not conk off during the dinner," or whatever. But imagine running a 14-tiered fort palace in the middle of nowhere, and one gen set a second. It's like Medanta, you know. You can't miss a heartbeat because somebody will roll down the steps. So the expense of doing that is madness. So that's not support.
I think, I don't know where we are on time.
I think we are through.
But, you know, I'll just open it to the audience for some questions. Aman is full of lovely stories about his journey in trying to fix heritage tourism infrastructure. So if anybody has a question.
So I have a question.
Yeah, can I just, yeah, there are lots of people who've raised hands. Sorry, ma'am, he was the first off the block, the gentleman here.
So use the mic.
चरखारी में क्या आपने शुरू कर दिया है क्या?
हाँ, नहीं, मैं गया था उधर, मगर वो जो महल है ना, उन्होंने उसमें आधे से ज़्यादा काम पहले ही कर दिया है. तो वो उन्होंने मतलब एक पुरानी इमारत को बिगाड़ दिया है, कहा जाए एक तरीके से.
उन्होंने ही मुझे बताया था कि आप ऐसा काम करते हैं और मैं उनको ले गया था.
नहीं, मुझे ले गए थे. मैं गया था यूपी और वहाँ पर करीब 50-60 तालुकदार और राजा वगैरह आए थे. उनकी प्रॉपर्टी देखने गया था. मगर जिस विषय में मैं अभी बात कर रहा था कि भारत में लोगों को अब नहीं मालूम कि क्या चाहिए, तो वो पुरानी इमारत में बाथरूम बना रहे हैं जैसे उनके स्वप्न के बाथरूम हैं ना, तो वो वहाँ जाते नहीं.
Anyway, we'll just,
Thank you.
you can,
Yes.
yeah, lady here, yeah.
So my question was that, you know, you're restoring these buildings, like, I don't really need a mic. So we saw like the before and after. So the before, in its original sense or in its original shape, must have been something, right? So does the government or does the law control that? So when you
No,
create
I'll
something-
answer that, yes.
Yeah.
No, there are three kinds of buildings. So there's the archaeological survey, which looks after the national buildings, which is Ajanta, Ellora, Qutub, Taj, all that, which are listed buildings, and part of that is the UNESCO listed buildings. So obviously you and I can't make 4 bathrooms in the Taj Mahal, you know, we don't want to. The second building are state archaeological buildings. So every state has a list, like Hawa Mahal, I think is not in the national list, it's in the state list. So what we are talking about, all that you see here, are unlisted buildings, which means that actually if you raise it to the ground and nobody can ask you a question. When we started, at least, if I had raised the whole of Neemrana and made apartments there, it wouldn't have been a sin. But now, because we've created so much consciousness, even unlisted buildings are. And the thing is that because, as you said, you know, everybody thinks of us first, and we did up to 27 hotels, then we shut some in areas where nobody went, you know, in Gujarat, Darbargarh and all that. So people stay every day in our hotels and they enjoy it, and then they contact us and say, my grandmother has a house here, we have an orchard there. So people keep saying, where do you scout? But now the scouting is done for us. But one little story I wanted to tell, which was connected to the French. Once I was there, and the travel agent said that we used to have 11 categories of rooms in Neemrana, which is not normal for a hotel because we were not on computer and all that. So there were little coteries, there was a rasoi, there was a non-vegetarian thing. We had turned all that around. From outside, it was what it was. So they said it's very difficult because when a group comes from somewhere, they pay the same price. So I happened to be there, so I said to our people that, we have to do something. And I speak.
Standardize.
Yeah, so not standardize. I said we have to standardize the guests, okay? So I met them when they arrived, and I wear a hat in the sun, so I had a hat. And what we had done was we had put all the room names in a hat. So I said to these gentlemen and ladies, I said, "Who can you see? Say, land, karma." No, so I said to them in a wonderful little speech that, India is the land of karma. So some of them had heard of karma and yoga and all that. So I said, so this is your moment of reckoning. Everybody will pick out their tag, and you'll know how good your karma is. So somebody got the Chandra Mahal, which was like, 60 feet long, and somebody got something which was 8 feet by 8 feet. So first they started to laugh with each other because they were friends, saying, "Oh, look, you've got bad camera. I knew you were a wicked woman," or whatever. Then came one lady, "My room is so big, I don't think I can sleep there. You come and sleep in my room." So it became the most wonderful game. Nobody complained that I paid more dollars, I paid less dollars, or whatever. So you can't go on doing that, but that was an example of how, you can turn a weakness into a strength. How you can Indianize something. That the word jugaad, I suppose, is the right way to do it. So,
Gentlemen, there, you had a question. Yes, please. Lady over there.
Sir, when you started way back, you didn't have any examples to fall back on. So today we are talking about heritage economics, we are talking about adaptive reuse. So that time when you had to start off, and one knows that when you're doing a work of conservation, money required is much more than actually you estimate.
yes.
Because there are many things that you come across while you're basically renovating. So I've been doing a research on heritage economics, which is a much talked about topic today and which is much required in our country because we have so much heritage. If we don't apply economics to our heritage, it will die out. That is the only way we can actually conserve our heritage. So did you have a project report in hand? I know you don't like consultants, you just mentioned that.
I just spoke against it, I think there is something like intuition. If you ask, I'm sorry I keep talking about the Marwaris, but they're very...
I'm a Marwari too, sir. I love that, honestly.
Okay, so then I can say more admirable things about Marwaris. The thing is that when a Marwari went somewhere, let's say even G.T. Birla, when they set up people talk about how, wow, you've done this. But people have done such amazing things also in public space, in industry. When you go to a godforsaken place and start a copper industry or an aluminum industry, it's very, very taxing. So your question, the first part of your question, is that the correct use of the word restoration is not for this, really. Restoration means, to make it as it was in the same material and so on. But when you're talking of changed end use, if a non-vegetarian kitchen was to become a bathroom in the plan of things, because you've seen the condition there's nothing in it. So you've got to get plumbing and wiring and all that. So in the first stage, being ignorant, and all that tuna and gharatka thing was happening, all the pipes were laid with tuna. And 20 years later, they all got rotten because, lime reacts with metal. So now, I would say that what we do, what Neemrana does, is revitalization. And it's a change end use. So the idea is that you give people the experience. We call ourselves experiential tourism. And I also am averse to the use of the word luxury, because luxury in a poor country like India, I think is somewhat offensive. It's you're living. You can do what you want in your private space at home, but when you go to a hotel, let's say like Neemrana, the people working there come from the village, and there is a lot of disparity. So if you are having a, champagne bottle for 10,000 rupees, it's his salary of the month maybe, So you cannot go on and on stretching that to a point of, I'm sitting in a jacuzzi, and those are all marketing ploys and photo things, So I once made the mistake of saying all the wrong things at a conference which was sponsored by some luxury people in Jaipur. I didn't know, I arrived late, so I started saying that I'm very anti-luxury. And I think that, when you show pictures of a wonderful Miss India who they put inside a jacuzzi with rose petals, and you say this is this hotel and that hotel, the truth is that by the time you get, 5 lakh rupees to stay in that hotel, you're middle-aged and unpresentable when you're naked in front of a mirror. So you can't be sitting, imagining that I am that model who's 16 or 21 and these are rose petals. Even your husband doesn't want to see you like that. So you are hiding your bodies from each other. So I think this whole thing about this marketing myth that you make about luxury, So the economics, if you want to go to it, is again intuition, sixth sense. I mean, people said to me things like, but didn't you take a big risk to put so much money? Okay, so firstly, I didn't put so much money. I mean, in 86, maybe it was. We spent 30 lakhs. No, so if I want to give you a better example, Kesroli Fort, which is 700 years old, but because I did everything myself, so we did 22 rooms for 22 lakhs. How's that for economics? So, and I consulted with ITC because they said to me, you do wonderful things, and also, they were doing 23 crores for one room, I mean, because they're talking about the whole building, but, for that kind of money, one could do a few hotels. So if you're pragmatic and start with the Indian premise that less has always been more, So it's a big subject, but to tell you in brief, so if Akbar sat on the throne, so he had all range of Rajas, Thakurs, Raos, everybody, and there was an etiquette of appearing in court. So if you were given a tazimi, which is an anklet of honor which you wore on your feet, and you walked up, so he would look, he would say, oh, this man's wearing one, so I have to stand up and greet him. Or if he wore two, like Shiv Narayan Birla of Pilani had 2 anklets from the Maharaja of Jaipur, because he's to fund him, etc. So if he met him in the court, the Maharaja got up and wished him like that, held his hand. So I think that these hierarchies are set up, and we today, they're not relevant, but we have to, the story I was saying was, and if a fakir came to the court, what happens? He's wearing a langot, he has no land, he has nothing. The Raja may lie flat on the ground and, touch his feet. So what does that teach you about India? That simplicity is always much higher than somebody who's flaunting their wealth. Why did Akbar go to walking to Fatehpur Sikri, to Moinuddin Chishti to ask for a son? It's the same thing. So I think that Neemrana is a combination of fakirdom, experience, India, simplicity, and of course, there's good food and joy, and there's aesthetics. But it's not to do with how much money you've spent.
Aman, there are lots of people who want to ask
Sorry.
that. One second. Gentleman in a white shirt. Yeah.
Hello, sir. I just recently completed my master in archaeology and with the subject of conservation also. So I just had 2 questions. One was asked by anyone, and the second question which I would like to ask is how what ASI should do to attract more visitors in their
Basically, what
that's the
can
question he did
that's the
ask.
question I asked. I'm not sure
Yeah. No, the thing is that ASI has to be more proactive, you know. So in the sense of that, you know, how this is not possible, how that is not possible, how you cannot use this space, how you mustn't use this space. So all those things come from a colonial thinking that they own the country and we are interlopers. But we are, enlightened citizens are not interlopers. We can do better than what they are doing. So I think that consciousness is beginning, and now when people talk to us, also when you get a white beard, I don't know why people dye their hair, you know, you should all stick white beards and roam around. People will touch your feet, they'll stand up when you go to a government office. So I get a lot of respect now.
The gentleman in the green shirt over there, yeah.
Yeah, perhaps, perhaps my question is redundant because you mentioned that you spent on Kasroli about £1 lakh a room. I think it came down
That
to.
was long ago. So,
Yeah,
you know,
but I'm just interested to know what the business model of these properties are and the financial model. So the two being different in the sense the business model, is it something which you just buy and invest your own money and
we
build
used to,
it?
but I said we don't now. Now, you know, if you have a ruined thing, we can set it up. You know, we
Okay.
can say I've got money to invest. If you've got no money to invest, then we take a longer lease. You know, so only we should answer that question.
No, and then
What is our business model?
Fine,
I think we don't
that-
have one.
I get your answer on that. The second one is what's the financial model, because these properties.
No, we
they-
don't have one actually. We
so
don't have one.
How
you
do
know,
you
It's-
recover? How do you recover your money?
Okay, let her answer. No, you can answer.
Why
it
don't you
that-
talk to her once this is
No,
over?
no.
Yeah.
But you
No,
can
big-
talk to
there-
her.
Aman, there are lots of people who want to ask you other questions.
Sorry. No, but actually we don't have a model. It's like, you know, how do you choose a wife, for example, you know? I mean, you know.
You
what-
don't, the
what
wife
is-
chooses
what
you,
is-
Aman. You don't, the wife chooses you.
No,
That's the
wife is-
cardinal
you have
rule.
to run after them, I heard, anyway.
Yeah, sure.
No, but I'm saying that, you know, there's a combination of better sense, intuition, or bad sense if it's a bad marriage, but you can get into building with the same relationship, you know. It's a passionate relationship. It's about love. It's about wanting to do it. It's wanting to, you know. So you can't have 20 points to tick off, you know. Look at the access of Neemrana. It's inaccessible, but everybody goes there. Book came out saying 100 things you must do before you die, and that's Neemrana is one of the things you must visit. So there's no road, but then you're not ready for death, maybe, you know. So it's okay. Yeah. Yes, your questions.
1 second, over here. Can you get the mic to her, please? Harsh, I'm coming to you. 1 second. Yeah. Lady.
I just wanted to say that Aman is very modest. And so if you go to Neemrana, I think he missed telling us that 3/4 of it is new. And when you look at it, you can't tell the difference between the old and the new. And he builds with so much passion that, and he's true to everything that he's saying. And the other thing is that how you promote your hotel is a non-hotel, Neemrana non-hotels.
Yeah, actually, right at the beginning, and I called it Neemrana non-hotel hotel. So somebody terribly important in India called me and said, "You don't negate something that you're marketing." I said, "I'm not negating it. I'm telling the truth, because 560 years ago they didn't build a hotel. You know, there were ramparts with little holes in them. We can't say now, please sit on the rampart and talk to your neighbor, because that's how the bathrooms were 560 years ago. So, you know, so actually there has to be pragmatic sense, but it's nice if you keep the bathrooms, show people this is how they used to use them. So you've seen it all happen, you know, in stages.
It's quite wonderful. And I was doing a program of masons training. And
Yes, of
so we
course.
had one segment where we had laying of tiles, teaching the masons. Aman said, I've never used any tiles ever in my hotels.
Yeah.
And it was very surprising. And then he was very charitable and let the kitchen become,
Yes.
the tiles to be laid in the
Ma'am,
kitchen.
there are others who want to ask questions.
Yes,
Can you pass it
so-
on to, yeah.
So I had two questions. One, I was struck by your starting point about time and space. So it made a lot of sense that you are actually bringing space and time together in each hotel and each property. At what point do you think that something becomes heritage in 2024? Would it, in your mind, be 100 years back? So does the Taj Mahal Hotel in Bombay now classify as a heritage, or is
No,
it?
there's an intact definition of anything that's over 100 years old is considered heritage, but now they've also said that 50-year-old homes, because noble homes, Art Deco homes, so on, which are they're more than 50 now, are also heritage. But your point about that's why I said not restoration but revitalizing. So suppose there was no conference hall in Neemrana, but today you have to have conferences. But it is to the glory of India and to our spirit of revival that we are able to find people who can, and give them the same materials. So the mountain on which Neemrana, Tijara, Kesoli sit is 2 billion years old. So if you have a Japanese view of rocks, 2 billion years is the oldest fold mountain in the world. So if you dig a foundation, and that's the stone that comes out, and you build a wall with it, you don't need to plaster it and hide it, because we're not doing PVC and all kinds of things. So we keep the material and the building techniques the same. So if you build with open face building without too much of the the mortar showing through, that's fine. But when you're building a swimming pool, you have to do tiles. You can't say we are doing Araish and Chuna, because there are chemicals in the water. So the chemical make it black and green and purple. So Somani tiles are welcome,
Arsh, we'll just...
And you make so many finishes
last-
now that even if you use when we use them, they have slate finishes, all kinds of finishes, and it's easy because when you put them on a wall, for example, a stone is much thicker, and you don't always have the place, and you don't have humidity coming through. So, we make a pragmatic use of the modern and,
We'll take that as the last question, please.
Okay. Just for making a point, I will try to speak in Hindi because अभी तक जो हम बात कर रहे हैं, जो आपने भी बोली सर, कि we still are in that colonial mindset. और वो जो colonial mindset है, actually में is not helping us grow as an economy. I was just googling. Unfortunately, I would say at this stage, मैं एक travel agent हूँ, और हमने आपके यहाँ बहुत सारी conferences भी करी हैं. पर कमिंग बैक टू माय क्वेश्चन, आपको लगता नहीं है कि इंडिया एज अ कंट्री बहुत बैडली मार्केटेड है? अगर हम यूके की बात करें, जैसे आप कर रहे थे, तो स्टोन एज क्या है, 5 पत्थर हैं, बट सारी दुनिया उनको देखने जाती है. और यहाँ पर इतने खूबसूरत मॉन्यूमेंट है, इंक्लूडिंग द ताजमहल, ठीक है, और बैडली मार्केटेड है. अभी हिंदुस्तान को अगर हम देखें तो शायद एक ताजमहल में ही पूरा कर लेते हैं. हर वेबसाइट वही
कहानी इतनी बड़ी बनाई है. अगर आप अजंता अलोरा जाएंगे, वहाँ 800 साल में क्या कुछ करा है. 4 लाख टन पत्थर हाथ से शिल्पकारों ने
करेक्ट. तो क्या आपको लगता नहीं है कि जो आप कर रहे हैं इस वक्त,
मैं
जो
सरकार नहीं हूँ, तभी तो ये मुझे बनाना चाह रहे हैं.
आप सरकार नहीं है, बट आप इंस्पिरेशन तो हो
मैं
सकते
तो
हैं.
यही बता रहा था इन्हें.
तो
मैं
क्या
आपको एक स्टैटिस्टिक देता हूँ इनके लिए. when I was having this conversation, I was researching it. Yeah, we didn't get down to such detail. In India, if you look at those 24 ASI UNESCO sites, right? In the best year, which was 1920, there were 24 million visitors, right? 24 million visitors, right? Ticket sales. And there are 1 billion people who buy tickets to watch movies. Of course, there's repeat and all of that, right? But you'll directionally understand it, right? So 24 million to 1 billion, right? So that's 40 times. In the UK, and I discovered that statistic, the local tourists, the ratio of movie ticket sales to ticket sales in heritage locations is roughly 1:1, right? So the numbers I saw, 2023 numbers, about 120 million people bought tickets to various British heritage spots, Stonehenge, etc., and a similar number bought tickets to watch movies, right? But I think the problem is, and I'd like to hear his, but I'll tell you my understanding after having done, is we don't sell heritage as an experience. We sell it as dead, old stone. There is no experience that we sell.
Can I
right?
add to what you're saying, sir?
And unless you're able to sell it as an experience, you will not be able to
No, but his
increase
question
the
is
traffic.
actually even more than that, you know.
एक्चुअली
पहले
सर
हम-
मैं जो कहना चाह रहा था वो ये है, आप दुबई के अंदर टूरिज्म का क्या समझते हैं वीज़ अवी इंडिया? दुबई में कुछ हेरिटेज नहीं है
नहीं, पर
अमेरिका में कहाँ?
वो। हाँ,
अमेरिका में कहाँ?
मैं हिंदुस्तान की बात कर रहा हूँ, इंडिया। इफ़ यू कंपेयर दिस टू, आप जब अमेरिका की बात करते हैं तो आप रिसर्च करिए, 80% पीपल डू नॉट हैव अ पासपोर्ट। दे वर्क, they and all their destinations are full during the entire year. The tourism is related to the country alone.
वो इंडिया में भी हो रहा है।
और इंडिया में ये मोदी जी ने वो जो अभी टैक्स बढ़ा दिया है, that is to encourage that. And as a hotelier he will know better. आज की डेट में हिंदुस्तानी प्रेफर्ड है टू अ गोरा, क्योंकि पैसा ज़्यादा खर्च रहा है वो।
Larger
तो
point is
मैं जो क्वेश्चन सर से पूछ रहा था वो ये था कि क्या हम हिंदुस्तान को बैडली मार्केट नहीं कर रहे?
नहीं, कर रहे हैं।
और आपके यहाँ तो गोरे सबसे ज़्यादा जाते हैं।
नहीं, इट्स नॉट ट्रू। जब हम व्हेन वी स्टार्टेड 60% लोग विदेशी थे और 40% भारतीय थे। अब 80% भारतीय हैं। तो भारत के लोग अमीर हो गए हैं और विदेशी गरीब हो गए हैं, तो और काफ़ी चीज़ें बदल गई हैं। पर I think the first part of your question was that first we have to be proud of ourselves before we make, before we can showcase it. So if you go to a village, all right, and I travel more than most sensible people do. If you see outside a house in a Haveli, I'm talking of Bissau, I went to a Haveli and there were lots of shoes and chappals lying outside. So I start taking off my shoes. They say, नहीं, आप अपने जूते मत उतारिए। क्यों? So क्योंकि हम बाहर के हैं, तो आप जापान जाएंगे, आपको बोलेंगे यहाँ पर अपने जूते उतारिए, यहाँ पर अपनी पतलून उतारिए और वहाँ पर अपनी कमीज उतारिए। आप करेंगे क्योंकि वो शान से कहते हैं कि अब आप युकाटा पहनो, ये करो, वो करो। और तो जब लोग हमको अपना आत्मसम्मान नहीं बढ़ेगा हमारा, तब फिर देश को तभी मार्केट करेंगे ना। अगर हमारी दादी को कोई आ गया तो दादी तुम अंदर चले जाओ क्योंकि कोई आ गया, तो जापान में तो उल्टा करेंगे ना। आप कहेंगे कि मेरी दादी है, उसकी पूरी कहानी बताएंगे। सो आई थिंक दैट we are talking to people like us who don't have such problems, but the whole of India has to go full cycle, and that's why I said we need a little more time. Our coastline, which is whatever hundreds of kilometers, will still be there, and I hope that when we are more evolved, that we will produce a product which is India, not trying to be somebody else, which we are not, because people don't enjoy that.
guys, we have to bring this to a close. Can we have a big round of applause for Aman's fantastic presentation? Thank you.